again, everybody. My name is Kevin Herholtz, and I'm the Director of Training, Technical Writing, and Technical Support here at Turning Technologies. And I'm going to be your host and moderator for today's webinar. So before we do go ahead and begin with today's webinar, I want to go ahead and talk about today's agenda as well as discuss the format for the session. Now, during this hour, we encourage you to submit questions at any time to our presenters. You may ask these questions at any time using the question pods located within your web controls. Now, you have two different options there. You have a chat option, and you also have a Q&A. Please feel free to use either one of those, and the questions will come to myself. We have another panelist, Morgan Tondo, right here in the room with me, and we'll go ahead and gather all those questions together. And at the very end of the webinar, in fact, the last 10 to 15 minutes, we will be posing live questions, all the ones that you've submitted to our presenters today. So with us today, we do have, including myself, two other presenters. We have Duncan Welder. He's Director of Client Services with RISC Incorporated. They're one of our LMS partners. And we also have Renee Boydo. She's a learning specialist with Koch Pipeline. Now, our first presenter today is going to be Renee. Now, Renee is a learning specialist for Koch Pipeline, and she has worked for Koch for 3 years developing and evaluating training programs. She is also responsible for implementing new and innovative processes within the organization's RISC learning management system. So the way this session is going to go today is Renee will go ahead and start things off with about a 25 to 30-minute presentation. They'll then go ahead and go back to me, and I'll talk about what we have to offer here at Turning Technologies with our solutions. And finally, we're going to go over to Duncan Welder, and he'll go ahead and talk about RISC Incorporated Learning Management System. Again, all the questions you have, please don't hesitate. Send those questions in to all panelists. One thing I do warn you against is sending any questions directly to the presenter. They may not be able to actually see those questions until the very end. All right, so with no further ado, Renee, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to go ahead now and make you the presenter, Renee. So I just made you the presenter at this time. And if you notice, Renee, on your screen, you should see share my desktop, or share screen, excuse me. So in the upper left-hand side, Renee, you got the quick start. And we can now go ahead and see the screen changing over. So you're seeing the screen change over, I believe, at this time over to Renee's. I do want to go ahead and just point out one thing here. If you click in the upper right-hand side where you have those two directional arrows, the diagonal ones, that's going to make the screen full screen, and you'll be able to see it, in the full screen mode. At this time, we can see your screen beautifully, so go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Like Kevin said, my name is Renee. I've worked for Koch Pipeline now for about 3 years. Started in the damage prevention department, and about 2.5 years ago, moved over to the training team where my main responsibility is managing our LMS system. Pipeline company, we're very operational and compliance heavy in that industry, and one of our main focuses is being audit ready. And that's kind of where this whole process kind of started. I do the training group, and we manage about 500 classroom sessions a year, majority of that being EH&S-based training, so environmental health and safety for those of you. And we use the Turning Technologies devices and their software in a lot of those classes. We really like the polling, the interactivity, in-class surveys, and the real-time feedback for our instructors. The LMS system that we use is VTA from RISC. We use our LMS system mainly for managing that live classroom training, but more than anything, the reporting out of it. We do quizzes and evaluations and track a lot of our compliance-based training, and we really utilize that to help drive some of our business decisions. So to ourselves, how can we get the best of both worlds? Can we use the functionality of the Turning Technology clickers in our classrooms, get that interactivity, get that real-time feedback, and can we get that into our LMS system and actually learn from it? So that's kind of where this came kind of into our hands. So this is what we wanted. Our vision for this entire process, we first wanted effective training. Well, what does effective training really mean? It can mean a lot of things for a lot of different people. So is the content applicable for the audience? That was a big one for us. We have different roles and different responsibilities and all over the country, and we wanted to make sure that we were targeting our training at the right people. And is delivery effective? We had all of our facilitators are SMEs. They're not trained facilitators in any way, and so we really need to help them as much as we can. Importantly, for us to have effective training, we need to know, are the employees going to class gaining valuable knowledge that's going to actually help them perform their job? And historically, we really only did level 1 evaluations. You know, what was their reaction to the class? Did they like the training? Did they like the venue? And was the experience valuable for them? And we really wanted to move into real retention and effectiveness. We also wanted to move away from that check-the-box mentality. We're a very regulatory-heavy industry, OSHA, DOT, PHMSA. That stuff's not very sexy. We have the same training year after year after year. And we have a lot of people who go to that class 10, 15 years in a row. So how can we take this mentality of we do this training because we have to, and be creative on how we deliver that regulatory training? Can we get some leading indicators on what's making our training effective or what's preventing the knowledge transfer during that class? And one of the leading factors of this was our industry is really, really changing. It used to be when we did audits, FEDA, DOT, they really just wanted rosters. The training, when did they attend, and that's really all they wanted to know. Well, they came back and they're like, well, what's your content? What are you teaching them? We need to change our audit process to show some of the content we're showing in class. Well, they're really, really moving towards competency. They really want to know, how are we being effective? Do we know being effective? And how do we know our employees are actually gaining any information and retaining that knowledge in class? We are a very busy company operations-wise, so I don't know how many of you guys have people in class that, well, they're going to show up in the morning and sign a roster, and we do a lot of our training kind of in office. Well, work happens, obviously. So phone calls happen, emergencies happen, people leave. So we really wanted to make sure that we were really capturing who was attending. Are we giving them the full credit that they need? Do they need to go back to another class to get full training? And we wanted to have a really easy way to get that. So here are the bonuses that we actually wound up getting out of this process as well. With this integration, we got a real-time classroom indicators. Like our SMEs are our facilitators. So these are people, some of them in the industry 10, 15, 20 years, some of them straight out of college, and they need as much help as they can get. As well as our classrooms are a mix of brand new employees and employees have been around the block a time or two. So get that benefit of real-time response. So with this integration, we're using pre-test questions at the beginning of the class as well as beginning of each topic throughout the class. And this allows that facilitator to adjust their delivery based off of that knowledge level. And so they're not covering material to an excess they don't need to, and they're focusing time more on the content that those individuals really, really need. As well as using a post-test question, either throughout, check for understanding, make sure people are retaining what they're trying to get across, as well as that comprehension, but also that post-test at the end of class, are they leaving with as much knowledge as we can give them? LMS administration was another huge one for us. 5 classes a year, processing every roster, giving everybody credit. VT does a great job making that easy for us anyway, but we wanted to find a way to completely make that happen. How to get someone to go to class, answer questions, and then automatically have their history showing up for them. So this process did take care of that for us. Our problem of who actually attended and how that worked, we use attendance questions. So our pre-test and post-test questions, we're able to say at the beginning of class, middle of class, and at the end or throughout, actually in attendance right now. And based off of how they answer that, our LMS gives them automatic full credit incomplete partial credit, or no-show credit, which allows us to make easier decisions on when and where to reschedule classes based off of need of people who weren't able to make it due to work purposes. We also didn't want to add admin time either. So we wanted to make sure this was extremely simple for our facilitators and our SMEs and for the LMS administrators as well. So have very formalized documentation and preset steps for them to take has made that extremely simple. Evaluation process. How can we get the full picture from that level 1 evaluation that we were doing? If you do paper surveys like most people do, and you class sessions in 7 different states 500 times a year, it's really hard to get all of that data together. So in this case, we wanted to be able to have those evaluations happen and get a big full picture feedback view of what does that look like. We wanted to see what else can we use to evaluate that. Not just the content, but the delivery and the facilitator. Can we move beyond that level 1 and start really understanding the content that we're giving, and is it applicable for the audience, and how can we pull that data to starting some teachings and coach back. And more than one class at a time was a big key for us. We really wanted that big picture look. When it comes to effectiveness, obviously true competency and the retention of the material, that's really, really what we wanted to get out of this. Can we show in audits that our employees are really, truly competent and know what we're trying to teach them? And then how do we make the content better? How do we continue to make those classrooms better? We use that pre-class knowledge, and because our LMS system is built in with our HR feed, we no longer have to spend time in class asking the question, well, how long have you been at your job, and what experience level are you? We already have all of that data. So when we do a pre-class knowledge check, we can then go back and report on all that data and understand how our new employees doing that are coming into the industry. How are they doing compared to our experienced people? Are there some mental model differences between the two? Of course, the during class checks, that comprehension, understanding it as the time is going through, or as a facilitator, do I need to stop and recover some of this material to make sure that we're all understanding it going forward? And then your post-test. It replaces those paper quizzes that you might be still doing. You can report on all data across all of your classes. And you get that real-time feedback as a facilitator, understand if people really get what I just told them. And one of the great things about this integration as well is you can make that post-test a completely separate day and time. So if you really want to get that true retention, a lot of people use that 2-2-2 model, 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months later to see if they're really, really understanding it. And we can do that. We have a class today and then come back together in 2 weeks for just a quick knowledge check, and all of that data still gets integrated as part of a lesson in the same class. And then future benchmarking. With all of this integration and with all of this data we're now able to pull, we can go back and look. Is it the content that we need to look at, or is our content good? Is the delivery accurate? Do we have the right facilitators? And one of the big things that we noticed from this that we honestly didn't think about before was location and cultural differences that need to be considered. People in, say, South Texas compared to northern part of the United States might get questions differently. They might look at policies differently, and making sure that you're teaching it in a way to be very universal sometimes can be very difficult. So these are some of the things that we really wanted to get out of this project, and these are things that we're utilizing today. So when we looked at what we really wanted, we wanted to find out, how do we do this? So for us, it made sense. The turning technology, clickers, loved them. We loved the PowerPoint polling. We loved the integration into the class and the interactivity. We loved the fact that you can play games in class, which our guys really love. They're out in the field all day, and we're going to pull them into a classroom for 8 hours. They want to be able to have some sort of fun while they're there. And we knew that the possibility of question use was endless in that context. We knew our LMS system was the best way for us to drive behavior change. Data and metrics, that our leadership is looking for, and that is what really going to build a case to start making some changes. So we knew we wanted to get both of these companies together to come up with a process that was going to meet all of our needs. Implementation, once we had kind of all of the kinks worked out of it, this is high level what happened with this whole process. And I believe that simplicity is genius when it comes to these kind of projects. You want to make sure it's simple for everybody involved. Sometimes it takes a lot more work on the back end, but in our case, it really did pay off. So we have a classroom session that happens using those clickers. They can anywhere. Like I said, we have 7 different states where we have classrooms. We can have multiple classes happening at once, and we prefer them to use a specific training laptop that has everything preloaded. Again, we want to make it simple. So in reality, all they really need is to make sure they have Turning Technologies downloaded to their computer and be able to run the project. Once the classroom session is over, we have automated file pushes that kind of moves everything from the computer where the session happened kind of to a file share, and then VTA pulls that information and loads it into our LMS system at that point. All done automatic timing, and we make it as simple as possible. Once all data is in our LMS system, they're able to pull all sorts of reports. We pull data in different fashions. We can make customized reports, and those are some of the things that we're starting to utilize now after a year of piloting to understand exactly what all we can use the data for. Some of the challenges that we really did have during this project, so if anyone can learn from kind of our lessons, we definitely want to share that. So knowledge level was a big deal. A lot of this presently had a lot of components with it, and our team does not have a IT background. We're more of a training background. So from a project management standpoint, that was hard, and my hands off to RISC because they made it a lot easier for us for sure. Also, a really good IT group to help you with the file sharing and SFTP site management, some information from one system to another to make it as easy as possible for all your end users is going to take a little bit of process there. And good documentation has turned out to be one of the most valuable things that we did to make everything easy for our facilitators and SMEs who are creating the content in the Turning Technology platform, and with the turnover that you might have in your company or with your facilitators, documentation, the step-by-step processes really does make that whole thing a lot easier. And our biggest lesson learned was the questions that you place into your presentation. It's really important to understand what are you trying to get out of your questions? What kind of knowledge are you really wanting? What's the most important factor in that training, and try to base your questions based off of that and place them in the right spot in your presentation. Questions sound very different to a room full of SMEs than they do in a classroom. Cultural differences as well in different locations can make a big difference on how those questions are perceived. So we learned kind of the hard way to take your time with your questions and placement within your presentation. This is an example of some of the reports we're able to get. I'm going to show you a little bit of how we're utilizing them here at Koch Pipeline and how we're actually driving some change with that. So as you can see here, it shows your device ID here over to the left-hand side. For us, because of our LMS system with our HR data, it automatically puts all of our employee data in there, so we can report off of all of that. We can compare question data, so question by question, which is the most missed, which one does everyone understand, and with that you can really get a better understanding of, did you cover that very well in class? Was it confusing? Is it just a knowledge gap that we have? So we're able to do that with all of our classes across the entire year. and also look at it from an employee standpoint. So they obviously get a score, they get a percentage, and all of that is put directly into their our LMS system and given a training history for them. With this, we also compare a lot of averages. We can get employees versus contractors. One of the big things that we get out of this is looking at new employees versus experienced employees and see kind of where that difference is. That's been very, very helpful for us. The pre-test knowledge also helps you see the retention. We can break this up to know which ones are pre-test questions and which ones are post-test questions. Go back and understand, well, after 5 years of taking this content, here's your pre-test after the last session. So how did you remember that information, especially if it's stuff you do on a daily basis? Do we have the right knowledge in place for our employees? And some of the future metrics we're really hoping to start measuring now that this pilot year is up, especially that HR data integrated, is going to be able to compare trends. Is there some location? People in different states, are they understanding things in a different way? Is there certain job titles or certain roles that do well on certain topics than others? Is supervisor trend that we're noticing? The experience level and retention from the previous years. And you can learn a lot about your facilitators in this way. So versus just using your evaluations at the end of class on how well the facilitator did, you can learn a lot about your teachers this way, is understanding, well, if everyone in this location is doing really, really well and they had this facilitator, and over in this location they're not, and there's a trend there, then we're able to really coach back our SMEs quite a bit. This is an example of our baseline instructor evaluation. So on top of the content questions that we look at, we do also do the self-paced polling evaluations at the end. And this also gives us that feedback to go back to our SMEs and help them be better facilitators. So we're able to understand, do we have the right people in those roles? Do we need to help them out? Where are we strong at, and where can we leverage our talent? Same thing with actual clicker devices. How well are those being received in the classroom? We have from the pipeline industry, very operations heavy industry in that case. So we have a lot of that baby boomer type generation that technology is not always their favorite thing. So when we do integrate that in the class, how well is that being received? How well are they liking it? And does it actually help them retain it? And we're really finding that they love it. What age group coming in, you have your new generation employees coming in and they're used to that kind of technology, and your old generation is now starting to understand how it helps them in those classes. And you can play games and all sorts of things and still get the metrics that you need out of that. Also evaluating the core content at the end. So we're actually able to go in and is the right content for the right audience. That's a big deal for us. We try to put a lot of people into the same class, and we are learning through this process and through these evaluations that maybe splitting up some of the audiences or doing more role-based training, maybe that's the right way to go. And if we are going to pull them out of their operational role for 2-3 days at a time to do training, what value are they getting out of it? So we want to make sure that they have what they need from it as well. So as you can see, the integration has really provided us with data points. We're able to identify a lot of trends. We're testing retention during class, at the end of class, 2-3 days later, 2 months later, and really understanding our knowledge level of our employees. We're able to evaluate content, our facilitation, and our audience level. And with the data as it comes in, we're able to move the overall performance of our company. We're enhancing our training programs. We're enhancing our classrooms. We're doing a lot of changes to the way that we perform our training. We're getting away from the what we want you to know more to the what we want you to do with what we want you to know. So we're moving to more of that competency-based training, and all of those moves have been shifted based off of the data that we've gotten from this integration. And we definitely couldn't have done it without turning technology and RISC, both of those together, and helping us come up with this information.
All right, thank you very much. Excellent presentation right there. I do appreciate that. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, what I'll do is go ahead and take control back of the presentation. So I'm going to make myself the presenter. I actually had a few slides built, but I said, rather than show some slides, why don't I just get into this Turning Point software so we can see exactly what Renee is referring to and what it's all about. So I'm going to do exactly that. So at this time, you should be viewing my screen, and I do have this Turning Point software opened up. Now, with Turning Point, there's a few different ways in which it could be used. Now, I realize that a lot of the folks on the line today might be some strong PowerPoint users. And if you, we have PowerPoint polling, which allows you to go ahead and use new or existing PowerPoint presentations and build in interactive questions right within there. If you're a PowerPoint user, we have something called Anywhere Polling. Anywhere Polling allows you to go ahead and ask questions on the fly, allows you to pull over top of different documents and web pages and streaming movies, anything else you can possibly imagine to have on your screen. And then the final thing is a nice assessment tool called self-paced polling. Self-paced polling allows individuals to go ahead and still have a hard copy of the test. But instead of using a pen or a pencil to take the test, they would instead use one of our response cards to proceed through every element of that test. So it says it is self-paced. So, Duncan might be on question 2, maybe might be on question 5. I may not have even started the test yet. It truly is self-paced. Now, here's how simple it is to actually create a polling slide within a new or existing presentation. So once I open up the Turning Point software, I click on PowerPoint polling. When I click on PowerPoint polling, it opens up, as you can see, standard Microsoft PowerPoint. The only difference between PowerPoint and Turning Point is Turning Point, when we go through that, it's completely integrated within Microsoft PowerPoint. Okay, we see at the very top we have a new tab called Turning Point Cloud, and Turning Point Cloud, of course, is our most recent software that we have. Anytime that I click on that tab, it always brings up this additional toolbar below. We just call this the Turning Point toolbar. Now, PowerPoint's still there for you. Okay, so Renee's using this. She still has all of her standard PowerPoint features that she always has. She just has an additional toolbar. Now, in my case, if I want to go ahead and bring up the presentation that I started with this afternoon, I can go ahead and bring it in. Now, a colleague of mine made this presentation outside of Turning Point. But since I opened up Turning Point first, selected PowerPoint polling, you can now see how this existing presentation, and this presentation could be a year old, it's completely integrated within the Turning Point software. So say for this presentation, we want there to be an interactive slide immediately following slide number 2. I click on slide 2. I'm on my Turning Point toolbar. I click on New. I can decide the question type that I'd like. In this case, let's just do multiple choice. I call multiple choice, and it builds this brand new polling slide right within my presentation. Here's how simple it is. I have 3 steps. Put in how are you today. After I type in the question, step 1 is complete. Step number 2, we can always have up to 10 possible answer choices. Once we're with that, we can go ahead and click outside this segmented answer box. One left click now populates my charts, and if I didn't want to do one single thing further, this slide's done. I can take it live in the presentation, and the folks within my room can use their responders or response cards to go ahead and interact with this question. Now, there's many other things that I can do with the basic question, how are you today, that deal with scoring, that deal with different ways to track folks. This is the easiest thing to do actually within Turning Point, just to get the engagement. Beyond that, we do have other types of questions. We have short answer, numeric, true, false, all kinds of different special types of questions, including comparative links, which Renee utilizes. We ask a question at the beginning of the presentation compared to a similar question you ask at the end, and in the reporting you can see the differences. We can also do, as Renee made mention to, demographics. So let's say that we wanted to go ahead and track how those different areas or different regions are responding to a question, or maybe track how different departments within your organization respond to certain questions. So I can put in a demographic assignment. A demographic assignment, and I'll just put in, pick your region. how folks answer this question. That's the group they're going to be placed in. Okay, go to my reports. Let's say that I have 10 interactive questions within this presentation. I'm able to see how the folks from the north answer the question versus the folks from the east, so on and so forth. I can even do multiple demographics. I can say years of experience, or male and female. So I can see how everybody who is a female from the north with 10 years plus experience compared to any other configuration I can possibly think of. See, we can really drill down and get some great information with doing these types of things. Now you can see, it's just part of PowerPoint, right? So I'm not outside of PowerPoint. I'm right in PowerPoint. I'm just building some nice interactive questions that go right with it. So here's how simple it is to go ahead and run the presentation. When you're ready to run the presentation, you still, as you saw before, go to Turning Point, load PowerPoint in, and I'll run this right from the beginning. I see my first couple of slides. They're nothing but PowerPoint, nothing unique, nothing different there. But when I come to my first interactive slide, you see in the upper right-hand side, I'm going to drag this to the middle so you can see it a little bit better. We call this the show bar. As soon as I landed on the question, my polling instantly opened. Now, I put on simulated polling to let the computer answer for me, but I can see that I have 30 responses at this time. Now, the folks in the audience doing the response to the question, they actually have two different ways. We have response cards. We have actually 3 different levels of response cards, a very basic type that just allows for multiple choice, and 2 a little bit more high-level response cards that allow for short answer as well as numeric response. Now, what if you don't want any hardware? Well, we have an option called ResponseWare, which is going to allow your individuals to use any web-enabled device to respond to questions anywhere in the world. Now, with ResponseWare, we have a free app simply called ResponseWare using your iOS device or Android to make it extremely easy for people. Now, you're presenting and you get all the responses. You're ready to close the polling. Click one time in your presentation. You get the results. And you can say, hey, here are the results, everybody, and maybe it's a question we need to go ahead and discuss a little bit further. So you can imagine with this technology, we can be asking questions based on information they may or may not know, or be asking opinion-based questions, or maybe even some high-level questions that we want to get a good gauge on whether or not the audience is understanding the content. So what a great formative assessment tool we have right now. Okay, move on in the presentation. Obviously, here's my demographic, getting this information, nice little breakdown so we can see that. Now, all said and done, and you're done with the entire presentation, you save the data right within Turning Points, called Save Session. Once we save it, we can immediately go ahead and generate reports. And once I generate my reports, I can instantly see how much I did. Okay, I can print this out. I can go ahead and put it in Excel or CSV. And as I go down, it's just showing me basically what the PowerPoint did. But in the upper right-hand side, I have the option to go ahead and get a little bit more detailed reports, including results by participant, which I know that Renee uses, so I can see exactly how each individual is responding. And we also have that results by demographic. Okay, so I can see, hey, how did everybody in the north answer, how are you today? Okay, it looks like 50% of the people in the north are just having an okay day, and we can see that from our demographics. Okay, so a lot of great information that we can go ahead and view within PowerPoint polling. Now, what if you are not a PowerPoint user? Well, if you're not a PowerPoint user, we have another option for you, and it's called Anywhere Polling. Anywhere Polling is going to allow you to go ahead and instantly start polling questions without setting up any content in advance. So when I click on Anywhere Polling, it just opens up, as you see right now, this little mini application. This application is going to allow me to go ahead and instantly start asking questions to my audience. Now, the thing about this floating show bar, as we call it, over top of anything. Okay, that could be over top of anybody's favorite website, which is ESPN.com, right? And the floating show bar is going to appear directly over top of this. Okay, so I have it over top, and when I'm over top of this, I can start verbalizing whatever questions I want. Okay, so if I want to ask a question based on the epic 54-game road trip, sounds like a nightmare to me, but I can post the question, I can open the polling, I don't have a responder with me, but if I did, I'd see the responses start coming in. I'd close the polling, and then I would see a little chart on the screen to view how everybody responded to the question. Anywhere Polling, because it allows me to go ahead and utilize the technology without setting anything up in advance. PowerPoint polling, very structured, set everything up in advance, build those questions in new or existing PowerPoints. Anywhere Polling, a little bit more informal. We can ask verbal questions, but we can still basically do the same things that we do within PowerPoint, And then self-paced polling, that's your testing application. Still give folks the hard copy of the test, but instead of them using that pen and pencil, they are going to go ahead and use those response cards to work their way through the test. The thing that I love about self-paced polling is, as an instructor, I can sit back on my computer and see how folks are responding in real time. So if I needed to, I can remediate right on the spot. So I know that we're saving questions to the end. I did see a few questions come in, but I just really wanted to give a quick little overview of what Turning Point was all about, how it can be used, and really the simplicity of it. If you're a PowerPoint user, we're just going to extend your knowledge on PowerPoint just a few steps further. And if you're not a PowerPoint user, that's fine. We have Anywhere Polling, which still allows you to utilize the technology in a very similar format without necessarily setting anything up in advance. All right, so at this time, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I'm going to go ahead and bring back up our previous presentation that we had. In fact, I need to keep on sharing now that I think about it, because I am going to change things over to Doug, and I'm going to go ahead and progress through his slides. So give me a moment as I bring back up the presentation. And Duncan, we have you on the line at this time, right? Just a little sound check as I'm bringing things back up.
Absolutely, I'm here loud and clear.
Good, so let's go ahead and lock and load these slides one more time. And Doug, of course, again, is from the RISC Incorporated, the LMS that Koch Pipeline uses along with Turning Technologies. All right, Doug.
I appreciate the introduction there. As both Kate and Kevin had mentioned, we're a learning management system provider based in Houston. We've been here since '92, so about 23 years in the space, and a strong focus on heavily regulated industries. So, looking LMS market, wide animal out there, but again, kind of our niche inside the world is really working with places that have some kind of regulatory oversight, EPA, DOT, ISO requirements, those things that are very prescriptive in the way of managing training. Not like the work that Renee is doing with her group there at Koch, and running some of those same reporting and auditing challenges that we try to help resolve. So while we're about the integration some, and then Kevin talked about the things that Turning does specifically, I wanted to give you just a quick overview of what we do at RISC and things to think about as you're considering integrations between technology partners in the future. So mention that being a management system provider here based in Houston, most of what we do is document regulatory compliance, help support employee development, our good solutions in place that minimize administrative burden. So a lot of that training that Renee had mentioned there earlier, increasing speed to market and improving competitive advantage, and doing that really by helping your employees better, more fast, more quickly, more efficiently than your competitors down the road. So kind of what we do, and if I could get you to slide over to that next slide, really how we do it, and that's largely through up to very systematic learning management. So being able to set up training requirements, all of those with refresher frequencies. They can apply it a number of different ways. So they could be job title based. They could be things that are more ad hoc or cross-functional kind of requirements. And then as you move and progress throughout your career, you have good portability of records. So the things that I take maybe in an entry-level job are still visible where they're applicable to more advanced levels. The other thing that the VTA suite really does that's amongst LMS providers is has a big focus on employee assessment. So we can build competency assessments, we can build question banks that are organized by objective and have back-end analysis on all those questions, and that's exactly how we came in the integration with Turning for Koch. Ultimately, we really want to have a good, clear inventory of skills documented in the system. So as you're creating work teams or people are migrating between roles, there's a good ability to see what good performance or training gaps may be needed to fill there. That next, if you will, gets us to our overall philosophy, and really the last piece of talking about the VTA suite. And by all means, you guys can reach out to me to talk LMS afterwards if you'd like. But again, we really try to become a one-stop shop for training inside an organization, enterprise-wide. We operate in multiple languages. We have multi-currency management for roll-up reporting, and then a big focus on reporting in general, being able to look at student history, being able to assess knowledge and skill gaps or evaluations there, doing some demand planning, demand forecasting based on upcoming training needs, registration trends, those kind of things. So in the last couple things I've mentioned there, just in these next two slides, is really things to think about, indicators for success with these kind of integrations. So Kevin, if you could advance me one more there. This is largely parroting earlier comments saying, what can we do better? But that's always the case. And I work with a lot of groups doing different types of technology integrations there. And you've got to start off with, what can we do to improve the status quo? And in this case, improving interactivity, streamlining testing, being able to provide that feedback and check for understanding, good documentation of abilities there. And you start looking at all those things that you'd like to see improve. You know, what are the tools in the toolbox that already exist? Well, in this case, this project, Koch is already using both RISC's VTA system for learning and the turning audience response system for delivering training, primarily in an instructor-led format. And you start looking at the different tools that you have in your toolbox and realize, gosh, these two animals should talk, because we're already creating testing. We have a way to provide feedback. Let's integrate these systems and make life smoother there, which leads then to the benefits. And again, in the next slide, it's the same things that I had mentioned earlier. Improved interaction inside sessions. And Kevin, move me forward just one more slide. So increased interaction, best action, good feedback immediately following a class, also the ability to get information, is in a more longitudinal from there. You have all your completion reporting. Renee mentioned having some attendance questions. The natural functions inside the learning management system is that if someone does fail a test, there's an automatic function for allowing them to retest. You can build parameters around that. And the same thing works after this integration with turning, where you think of maybe just logging on and taking an online test, and maybe I've failed something, I need to come back through. Because that function already exists in that desktop environment, now that we're integrated on the turning side, someone does attend a course in the audience response devices in a class and does not make the satisfying grade, then the LMS already knows that they have to go back through and take a reach test on that particular topic area. So it gives you a good opportunity to the back end tracking and chasing people down. So a lot of benefits coming through with the system, and all really based on looking at the tools that you have in the toolbox, thinking about the training you're offering now, the things that you're doing now, and with that, sorting out those opportunities, introducing vendors together, and get them working at some kind of common goal there. So with that, let's touch about RISC and the virtual training assistant learning management system. I know my contact information is on the last page of this slide deck as well, so any questions that I can't answer separately, don't hesitate to let me know. With that, Kevin?
So much. Appreciate the information there. So ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we're going to go ahead and proceed to the Q&A section of this. So one more time, if you do have any questions for myself, Renee, or Duncan, please go ahead and submit those questions using either the chat or the Q&A. We'll be posing some of those live at this time. And the first question is going to go over to Renee. And Renee, the question that came in was, can you discuss how your auditors have accepted the use of electronic attendance records versus traditional and paper and ink sign-in sheets?
Well, that's a good question. And as we know, our auditors, they have those paper check-in sheets, and they haven't. We actually still use the paper sign-in sheets for our official record for auditors. The difference is now we no longer have to process those manually in our LMS system to show reportable credit that we can show in their history, as well as having kind of understanding of who attended class and who had to wind up leaving, and being able to manage the roster in that way. Now we're able to get that automated data back versus waiting on the knowledge of the facilitator or the SME in that class. The short answer is we still have to have them sign a paper copy to go along with the automated records for audits.
Okay, kind of the same topic, and just through my own years of experience working with Turning Point within the corporate sector, there's always the concern of being tracked and the whole someone's watching me and things like that. How's the reception been for using Turning Point along with grading?
It's actually been fantastic. That was a worry of ours as well, what that reaction is going to be. And I am enough to work for a company filled with individuals who really want to get better and really want to make sure that they're doing the best that they can for their job. And we've had really, really good feedback on the interaction they have in class. The classes are boring. I mean, OSHA training is not exactly the most exciting thing in the world. So being able to have some fun during that and, learning from that as well and understanding how they're doing compared to their peers has actually been a really big incentive.
Thanks for that very much. Duncan, we're going to go ahead and shift over to you at this time. So I know you talked about question banks, and we had two separate questions come in regards to the content of the question banks. Can you discuss a little bit in terms of what you can provide with that?
Sure. It's from the standpoint, and there are questions that are created inside, or they can be created inside the turning, specifically questions that can be created inside the LMS directly. So inside the LMS world, organize our question bank into objectives, and the idea then is to be able to have a random selection of questions from different objectives, maybe segregated by difficulty inside that bank for delivery of tests. So managing your standard multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank, matching, check all that apply kind of questions, being able to incorporate I'd say images, graphics, other resources like audio clips, video clips, those things into your questions. And then as those questions get completed, whether that's someone completing those questions as part of a test through the LMS, proper sitting down at their desktop and be logged into a browser, or if they're completing them in a larger instructor-led session using the audience response devices from Turning Tech. Either way, though, that data goes back into the LMS and put a report on someone's completion, what they actually made, did they pass, did they not pass, but then also over a period of time as I start collecting that data, so really looking at my question bank to say, all right, how are, like Renee had mentioned earlier, people in one region answering compared to people in another region, how are supervisors answering compared to non-supervisors, contractors compared to employees, and if you think at a very base level, if you have an objective full of questions, that people are answering correctly somewhere in that 80-85% range, right? Your kind of standard, what you would expect. And then you see a question that's being answered correctly 5 or 10% of the time, and you realize, gosh, everyone answer the question incorrectly, the vast majority are being led to one specific incorrect answer. Is there something either in my material or in the question itself that's leading people down a wrong path there? So again, that's really the structure from an LMS side in that interaction between the LMS and the audience response devices.
Now, next question, Duncan, once again directed to you. Now, I realize there might be a slight bias with this one, but somebody who's evaluating a learning management system, what are some things they should be looking at?
Gosh, yeah, clearly I'm going to have some bias here, but really identify up front, you'll identify up front the more nice-to-have items. It's very easy to get, I think of kind of trade show-itis, right? It's like, oh gosh, I need everything that's new and shiny going through, and it may be the case that you do, but it's easy to walk into that environment and say, gosh, there are hundreds of systems on the market that all do something like learning management. It's pretty loose moniker inside the industry there. But once you really start laying things out and say, gosh, I need to have the ability to go in and do competency assessment, or I need to be able to track repetitive training, or I need to have some kind of e-commerce integration for partners and tie into my HR system. It's identifying those critical items, the must-haves over the good-to-haves that really help you bring a short list. And once you have those things identified, then get that short list and start evaluating more of the nice-to-have kind of items. But the other thing that I always recommend is talk to existing users. Find out what that user community is like, what kind of sharing there is, responsiveness inside or from that group. Because ultimately, your learning management system touches just about everyone inside the organization. Maybe your email system touches a few more there. But everyone has some kind of interaction with the LMS, really from the brand new employee to this person who's a senior level leader there. So make sure that you've looked at those needs across the organization and find them and laid those out. Really helps move in the right direction there. And we've got a couple. I've got a couple blog articles and magazine articles that, if interested, I'm glad to bounce that direction as well.
So, Duncan, every organization is going to have some different needs, and every LMS is going to be catering to those needs a little bit different. But of course, we like RISC, though, right?
That's right. Legitimately, I don't really, in all fairness and full disclosure mode, we're not really an academic system, so I don't feel like we're a competitor with something like a Blackboard that's really focused on more of a semester solution. We are much more of a corporate system, and those are the kind of distinctions that I think make a big difference there.
Very good. Thank you for that very much. Renee, we have one final question, and then this one is directed towards you, and it's kind of a two-part. So the first part is dealing with frequency use of turning point within your training sessions, and then secondly, if I could state this correctly, how are you always using it for, lack of a better term, high-stakes assessments or getting grading type information, or do you ever use it just for simple engagement and getting general feedback from your group?
Great question. We use both. We get a lot of our data on more of our high-risk EH&S type training, so that's where we are focused. But like I said, we do 500 classrooms a year on about 15 to 16 different subjects within our company. And so we use our clicker technology, the turning technology presentations, in probably about 25 to 30% of those across all our operating areas. And the engagement's actually one of the first things that we do with it. people who are used to being out in the field 24/7, working out on the pipeline, and when we send a class for 2 or 3 days for training, they need something to keep their attention, because it's definitely a very different venue for them. So the interactivity, the playing games within the content, that's been a really big positive that people are liking. And all of our SMEs, not just our EH&S and safety type stuff, but all of our SMEs are loving the fact that now they can go back and report some of this data and understand what can they do to be doing better. Are we utilizing our classroom time to the best we can, and do we need to change up some of our content? In all, it's something that, like, I'm thinking about 25 to 30% of our classrooms now, we're going to be adding another 4 different topics next year into the clickers, so that's going to bring us up to almost 50% of use in all of our classroom sessions.
Pretty awesome right there, Renee. Great answer. And it's always interesting because that's a common question that comes in with a lot of the sessions that we facilitate, and it's always interesting to me to hear how different organizations respond to that. But it is a lot of consistency in terms of it's a mix of a little bit of everything. So thanks for that. Renee and Duncan, thank you both for a wonderful presentation. Thank you for your time. I found it very beneficial myself, and it was some great fresh content. Once again, everybody, I know that there were some questions that came in regards to specific functionality use within Turning Point. Now, everybody in today's session is going to be getting the recording as well as the presentation directly from me. So if you go ahead and schedule some time with me or just ask me some questions, please feel free to go ahead and respond to my question. Please me my email, and I'll be more than happy to go ahead and answer anything you have in regards to exact functionality within Turning Point. Although, I'd like to thank everybody for taking an hour out of your day to go ahead and join me. Thanks so much. I hope that you have an enjoyable rest of the day and a wonderful week. Thanks again. Take care, everybody.